I came home from a fishing trip in Michigan to find a family of strangers grilling burgers on my dock and two kids cannonballing off my boathouse roof. My boathouse, the one I built with my own hands 3 years ago on Lake Huron, the structure I'd meticulously designed to store my vintage Chris Craft and house a small loft where I could escape the world. These people had beach towels all hanging from the windows, inflatable pool toys scattered across the deck, and they were acting like they owned the place. "Excuse me," I called out, walking down the wooden steps that led from my main house to the waterfront. "What exactly are you doing here?" A portly man in board shorts and a Hawaiian shirt turned toward me, spatula in hand. "Hey there, you must be the neighbor. Beautiful property you've got here. We're renting the boathouse for the week. $300 a night, but totally worth it for this view." My jaw dropped. "You're what?" "Renting the boathouse," he repeated, looking confused. "Through the property management company. We've got the confirmation email and everything. Cost us $2,000 for the week, but Karren said it was the best lakefront rental in Lexington." Karren. Of course it was Karren. Karren Whitmore had been the president of our Shoreline Estates HOA for the past 4 years, and in that time she'd made it her personal mission to control every aspect of our waterfront community. She was 53, had that distinctive angular haircut that screamed suburban authority, and wore her HOA president badge like it was a military rank, but this was a new level of overreach even for her. "I'm Blake Quincy," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I own this boathouse. Nobody authorized any rental." The man's face went pale. "What? No, that can't be right. We paid in advance. My wife is inside unpacking right now." I pulled out my phone and dialed Karen's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she thought she had the upper hand. "Blake, what can I do for you? You can explain why there are strangers living in my boathouse and paying you $300 a night for the privilege." There was a pause. "Oh, that. Well, according to HOA Regulation 7.3b, any structure within 50 feet of the water that exceeds 400 square feet is considered community property and can be utilized for revenue generation to benefit the association." "That's completely made up, Karren. I built that boathouse on my property with my money. You have no right to rent it out. Actually, Blake, if you'd read the updated bylaws from last month's meeting, the meeting you didn't attend, I might add you'd know that the board voted to implement this policy. It's perfectly legal." "Legal? You're collecting money for renting out my property without my permission. That's theft." "That's revenue optimization," she corrected. "And before you get any ideas about making this difficult, remember that I can cite you for that overgrown hedge on your eastern property line and the non-regulation color of your window trim. Would you like me to continue?" I hung up. My hands were shaking with rage. The family on my dock was watching me nervously, their vacation clearly taking an unexpected turn. "Look," I said to the man, "this isn't your fault. Give me a few hours to sort this out. In the meantime, you're welcome to stay in your car or head into town, but you can't stay in the boathouse." "We drove 8 hours from Ohio," a woman's voice called from inside. She emerged, looking frazzled and angry. "Our kids were promised a lakefront vacation. We have a contract. I understand, but that contract is fraudulent. Karren Whitmore had no authority to rent this space. I'll help you get your money back, but you need to leave." The next hour was a nightmare of arguing phone calls, and eventually watching this poor family pack up their vacation gear with their 2 disappointed kids crying in the back seat. They left after the wife threatened to call her lawyer, and I assured her I'd support any legal action against Karren and the HOA. Once they were gone, I climbed up into the boathouse loft. Sure enough, there were signs of previous occupancy. Different towels in the bathroom, forgotten toiletries. A receipt dated from 10 days ago for a local seafood restaurant. Karren hadn't just done this once. She'd been running an operation. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through my property records, the original HOA bylaws, and every piece of documentation I had about the boathouse construction. Everything confirmed what I already knew. The structure was entirely on my property, built with my permits, and absolutely not subject to HOA control. Karren's supposed regulation was fiction. That evening I drove to Karren's house, a sprawling colonial at the entrance of Shoreline Estates that gave her a perfect vantage point to monitor everyone coming and going. She answered the door in her typical uniform of capri pants and a bedazzled tunic, her expression shifting from surprise to irritation when she saw me. "Blake, this isn't a good time. Make it a good time. We need to talk about the boathouse, and we need to talk now." She sighed dramatically and stepped aside. Her living room was exactly what I expected. Inspirational signs about wine and friendship, photos of her with various local officials, and a bulletin board covered in HOA violation notices waiting to be distributed. "Karren, I want every dollar you've collected from renting my boathouse. I want it by tomorrow, and I want a written statement that you had no authority to do what you did." She sat down in her armchair like a queen on a throne. "Blake, you're overreacting. The HOA needs revenue. Our pool needs resurfacing, the entrance sign needs repainting, and the holiday decorations budget is completely inadequate. Your boathouse sits empty most of the time. I'm simply maximizing community assets. It's not a community asset, it's my property. Structures along the waterfront affect property values for everyone. That makes them community concern. I'm well within my rights to manage them appropriately. Show me where in the bylaws it says that. She waved her hand dismissively. The board voted. That's all the authority I need. What board? You mean Sharon Davies and Linda Morton? Your tennis buddies who vote yes on everything you propose? I leaned forward. I want the accounting records. I want to see every rental, every payment, and where that money went. That's private HOA financial information. Not when it's my property generating the revenue. You've committed fraud, Karren. Probably theft. I'm guessing we're talking about thousands of dollars here. For the first time, I saw a flicker of concern cross her face. You're being ridiculous. I've done nothing wrong. If you don't like how this community is run, you're welcome to move. I'm not going anywhere. But you might want to start looking for a lawyer. I left her house and immediately called my own attorney, a guy named Marcus Chen who'd helped me with the property purchase years ago. He listened to the whole story, asked for documentation, and told me he'd have a cease and desist letter drafted by morning. Blake, if she's been doing this for months, we're talking about serious money, Marcus said. And if she's been keeping it for herself instead of putting it in HOA accounts, that's embezzlement. You might want to loop in the police. Let's start with the letter and see how she responds. Maybe she'll panic and return everything. But I should have known better. Karren Whitmore didn't panic. She escalated. The next morning I woke up to find a certified letter taped to my front door. It was a violation notice citing me for 17 separate infractions ranging from unauthorized watercraft storage to improper dock maintenance to unsightly yard debris. Each violation carried a $100 fine. The letter informed me I had 72 hours to remedy all issues or face a lien on my property. I called Marcus again. She's retaliating. This is garbage. My property is immaculate. Document everything with photos and timestamps. This actually helps our case. Shows she's harassing you in response to legitimate complaints. I'll have the cease and desist delivered today. I spent the morning photographing every inch of my property, making sure I had evidence that Karren's violations were fabricated. My neighbor, an older guy named Ed Patterson who'd lived in Shoreline Estates for 20 years, came over while I was documenting the dock. Heard you had some excitement yesterday, he said. Vacationers? Karren's been renting out my boathouse without permission. You know anything about this? Ed's weathered face hardened. I know she tried to pull something similar with my gazebo last year. Said it was an entertainment venue that should be available for community events. I told her where she could shove her community events. Did she back down? Eventually. But only after I threatened to show up at the next HOA meeting with a lawyer. Karren backs down when she thinks someone will actually fight back. Most people don't want the hassle, so she gets away with murder. Well, I'm fighting back. I've got a lawyer sending a cease and desist today. Ed nodded approvingly. Good. Someone needs to knock her down a few pegs. You need any help, you let me know. Half this neighborhood is sick of her power trips. The process server delivered Marcus's letter to Karren at 2 in the afternoon. I know because she called me at 2:15, her voice shaking with rage. How dare you threaten me with legal action? I am the HOA president. I have every right to manage community property. For the last time, Karren, it's not community property. And you're going to return every dollar you collected. Or I'm filing a police report for theft. You're making a huge mistake. I have connections in this town. The mayor, the police chief, the county assessor. You think you can just waltz in here and threaten me? I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you of the consequences of your actions. You committed fraud. You stole from me. Those are facts, not threats. She hung up on me. That evening I got a call from an unknown number. A pleasant male voice introduced himself as Roger Bentley, attorney for the Shoreline Estates HOA. Mr. Quincy, I've been retained by the association to address your recent harassment of Mrs. Whitmore. I understand you've made some serious allegations without basis. She's been renting out my property and keeping the money. I have witnesses. I have the family she evicted. I have documentation. What you have is a misunderstanding of HOA governance. Mrs. Whitmore was acting in her capacity as president to generate revenue for the community. If you have concerns about financial management, the proper channel is to raise them at a board meeting, not to threaten legal action. The proper channel is for her to not rent out property she doesn't own. Tell your client she has 48 hours to provide full accounting of rental income and return my portion, which is 100%. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Mr. Quincy. In fact, we're prepared to file a countersuit for defamation and harassment if you continue down this path. Mrs. Whitmore's reputation has been damaged by your baseless accusations, I laughed. File whatever you want. I'll see you in court. Marcus was less amused when I told him about the call. They're trying to intimidate you. It's a common tactic. Make the fight seem expensive and complicated so you'll back down. I'm not planning to, but I think we need to escalate. File a police report. Get this on record officially. Agreed. I'll draft a comprehensive complaint we can take to the Lexington police tomorrow. In the meantime, do not engage with Karren or her attorney. All communication goes through me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept running the numbers in my head. If Karren had been renting the Boathouse at $300 a night, and based on what I'd found, she'd had at least a dozen bookings over the past 3 months since the summer season started. We're talking about thousands of dollars. Maybe tens of thousands if she'd been doing it longer than I thought. I pulled out my laptop and started searching. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Karren had listed my boathouse on 3 different vacation rental sites under the name Shoreline Estates Lakefront Cottage. The description was flowery and completely misleading, calling it a charming waterfront retreat and community amenity. The photos were professional quality, showing the loft I'd furnished, the deck I'd built, even my Chris Craft in the slip below. The reviews were glowing. Families loved the location, the privacy, the amenities. One review from May mentioned the helpful property manager Karren, who made check-in so easy. Another from April praised the well-maintained grounds and access to community beach. I screenshotted everything. The listings, the reviews, the pricing calendar that showed bookings going back to March. Then I checked the HOA financial records that were supposedly available to all homeowners through the community portal. There was no mention of rental income, no line item for property management or vacation rentals or anything that might indicate where this money was going. Karren was pocketing it, all of it. The next morning, Marcus and I went to the Lexington Police Department. We met with Detective Sarah Morrison, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who listened to the whole story while taking detailed notes. "So you're saying the HOA president has been renting your property without permission and keeping the proceeds?" she asked. "Exactly. I have evidence of at least 15 bookings at $300 per night. That's $4,500 right there, and that's just what I can prove from online reviews and calendar availability. The actual number is probably much higher." Detective Morrison examined the screenshots I'd printed. "And this structure is definitely on your property. You have a deed, survey, all of that?" "Everything. It's 100% my property. She has no legal claim to it whatsoever." "Has she returned any of the money?" "No. She claims she has the authority to rent it under HOA rules, but those rules don't exist in any of the official bylaws. She's making them up." The detective leaned back in her chair. "This is interesting. It's not your typical theft case because of the HOA angle, but if what you're saying is accurate, she's definitely committed fraud at minimum. I'll need to investigate, talk to some of these renters, verify the money trail. That might take a few weeks. She's probably still booking people. I checked this morning and the calendar is open for rentals through September. We'll contact her today and inform her to cease any rental activity pending investigation. If she continues, that would show consciousness of guilt, which actually helps the case. In the meantime, you might want to post your own notice on your property. Make it clear to anyone who shows up that rentals are unauthorized." I left the police station feeling somewhat better. At least there was an official investigation now. Marcus filed a civil complaint the same day, suing both Karren personally and the HOA for fraud, conversion, and unjust enrichment. He also filed for an emergency injunction to stop any further rentals and freeze any assets related to the scheme. Karren's response was swift and unhinged. That afternoon, every homeowner in Shoreline Estates received an email from her with the subject line, "Protecting our community from hostile residents." The email was a masterpiece of manipulation. It painted me as a troublemaker who'd refused to follow community rules, who'd harassed her personally, and who was now trying to destroy the HOA with frivolous lawsuits. She claimed my boathouse was a safety hazard that she'd been trying to manage responsibly. She said I'd threatened her, that I'd been verbally abusive, and that she feared for her safety. My phone started ringing within minutes. Some neighbors were supportive, like Ed Patterson, who called to say the email was obvious garbage. But others were concerned. A woman named Patricia from 3 streets over asked me nervously if I was really causing problems for the HOA. A younger couple I barely knew sent a text asking me to just work things out peacefully. This was Karren's real power, not the fake HOA regulations or the violation notices. It was her ability to control the narrative, to make herself the victim, to turn the community against anyone who challenged her. But she'd made a critical mistake. By sending that email to everyone, she'd put her claims in writing. Marcus was delighted when I forwarded it to him. "This is defamation," he said. "Clear cut. She's accusing you of things that didn't happen, damaging your reputation in the community. We can add it to the lawsuit. She's digging herself deeper with every move." The hearing for the emergency injunction was scheduled for the following week. In the meantime, Detective Morrison had been busy. She'd contacted several of the families who'd rented the boathouse and confirmed they'd paid Karren directly through Venmo and PayPal. She'd also subpoenaed Karren's financial records, which apparently required a warrant due to Karren's resistance. "She's lawyered up hard," the detective told me over the phone. "That usually indicates someone knows they're in trouble, but we've got enough evidence to proceed. I'll be recommending charges of theft by deception and possibly identity fraud. Since she represented herself as having authority over your property, how long until charges are filed? The prosecutor needs to review everything. Could be another week or two. These things take time." I didn't have time. Every day this dragged on was another day of stress, another day of my property being misused, another day of Karren spreading lies about me to the neighborhood. The emergency injunction hearing was held in Sanilac County Circuit Court on a humid Tuesday morning. Karren showed up with her attorney Roger Bentley and a smug expression that made me want to scream. Marcus presented our case efficiently. Property records proving ownership, evidence of unauthorized rentals, financial documentation showing no HOA accounting for the rental income, and testimony from one of the renter families who'd driven back from Ohio specifically to testify. The father, whose name was Tom Richardson, told the judge about their experience. "We paid $2,000 for a week's vacation rental. We had a confirmation number, email correspondence with Mrs. Whitmore. Everything seemed legitimate. Then Mr. Quincy showed up and told us the rental was fraudulent. We had to find a hotel last minute. It ruined our vacation and cost us even more money." Judge Patricia Holbrook listened carefully, then turned to Karren's attorney. "Mr. Bentley, does your client dispute that she rented Mr. Quincy's property without his permission?" "Your Honor, Mrs. Whitmore was acting in her capacity as HOA president under regulations established by the board. She believed she had the authority." "Believed she had authority is not the same as actually having authority. Does she dispute the rentals occurred?" Bentley hesitated. "No, Your Honor, but the HOA. The HOA doesn't own Mr. Quincy's boathouse. That's clear from the property records. Mrs. Whitmore rented property she didn't own and collected payment. That's the definition of fraud." Judge Holbrook signed the injunction on the spot. "Mrs. Whitmore is hereby ordered to immediately cease any and all rental activity involving Mr. Quincy's property. She is also ordered to provide full accounting of all rental income collected, and those funds are to be held in escrow pending resolution of the civil case. Violation of this order will result in contempt charges. Is that clear?" Karren's face had gone bright red. She nodded stiffly. As we left the courtroom, Tom Richardson stopped me. "I hope you take her for everything. What she did was inexcusable. We've already filed a complaint with the Michigan Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Other families should know she's running a scam." I thanked him and shook his hand. Marcus was practically glowing with success. "That went perfectly. Now she's under court order. If she violates it, she goes to jail. And we've established the basic facts of the case. The civil suit is going to be a slam dunk." But Karren wasn't done fighting. 2 days after the injunction, I received a notice that I was being sued by the Shoreline Estates HOA for breach of community covenants. The lawsuit claimed I'd failed to maintain my property, had engaged in harassment of board members, and had damaged the community's reputation with false allegations. They were seeking $50,000 in damages. "It's a slap suit," Marcus explained. "Strategic lawsuit against public participation. She's trying to intimidate you with legal costs and stress. But Michigan has anti-slap statutes. We can get this dismissed and potentially recover attorney fees." The entire situation had consumed my life. I was spending hours every day dealing with lawyers, court filings, police reports, and hostile emails from Karren's supporters in the neighborhood. My business as a freelance architectural consultant had taken a back seat. I was sleeping poorly, eating worse, and generally miserable. Ed Patterson invited me over for dinner one evening, and his wife Beth made a pot roast that was the first real meal I'd had in days. We sat on their porch overlooking the lake, and Ed told me about the history of the HOA. "Karren wasn't always this bad," he said. "When she first became president, she was actually pretty reasonable. Organized some nice community events, kept the common areas clean, nothing too intrusive. But power corrupts, you know. Every year she got a little worse. A little more controlling, started making up rules, targeting people she didn't like with violation notices. I think it became an addiction for her. The control, the authority. Has anyone ever tried to vote her out? Couple times. But she's got her supporters. People who benefit from her targeting their enemies, or who just don't want to get on her bad side. And she makes it hard to challenge her. Schedules meetings when she knows opponents can't attend, controls the proxy votes, manipulates the process. It's a dictatorship disguised as democracy." Beth refilled my wine glass. "What you're doing is brave, Blake, standing up to her. But be careful. Karren doesn't forgive or forget. Even if you win, she'll make your life difficult for as long as she's in charge. Then maybe she shouldn't be in charge." How hard would it be to recall her? Ed considered this. Would need signatures from 30% of homeowners to call a special election, then a majority vote to remove her. But I'll tell you what, after this rental scheme comes out, you might have the support. People tolerate her because they think she's keeping property values up. Once they realize she's a criminal, that tolerance might evaporate. The idea took root in my mind. Don't just defend against Karren, go on offense. Remove her from power entirely. Over the next week, I started quietly talking to neighbors. Not everyone. I didn't want word getting back to Karren before I was ready, but people I knew were frustrated with her leadership. Ed helped, introducing me to other longtime residents who had their own Karren horror stories. There was Margaret Chen, whose teenage son had been banned from the community pool for roof play that consisted of splashing his friends. There was David and Jennifer Horowitz, who'd been fined $5,000 for painting their house an unapproved shade of gray that was barely distinguishable from the approved color. There was Frank Delgado, who'd been denied permission to install solar panels because Karren thought they were aesthetically inconsistent with community standards. Each person had a story. Each person was afraid to speak up. But when I explained what Karren had done with my boathouse, and that criminal charges were likely coming, they started to see an opportunity. If you organize a recall effort, I'll sign, Margaret said, and I'll get my neighbors to sign. We're all tired of walking on eggshells. Meanwhile, the criminal investigation was progressing. Detective Morrison executed the search warrant on Karren's financial records and discovered that over the past year she'd collected more than $30,000 in rental income from my boathouse. $30,000 that had gone directly into her personal accounts. None of it had been reported to the IRS. None of it had been disclosed to the HOA board or the community. This is way bigger than we initially thought, the detective told me. She's been running a substantial operation. We're talking about felony theft, tax evasion, fraud. The prosecutor is preparing multiple charges. When? Soon, within the week. We want to make sure everything is airtight because her lawyer is going to fight hard. That night, I sat in my boathouse for the first time in weeks, just absorbing the space. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place I came to think, to work on my boat, to escape the pressures of daily life. Karren had violated that. She'd turned my private retreat into a commercial venture for her personal profit. I pulled out my laptop and started drafting a letter to the community. Not the angry screed I wanted to write, but a calm, factual explanation of what had happened. I detailed the unauthorized rentals, the court injunction, the ongoing criminal investigation. I explained that I'd tried to resolve this quietly, but Karren had chosen escalation and retaliation. I laid out the case for why she needed to be removed from the HOA board. Marcus reviewed it and suggested a few edits to avoid any defamation claims, but overall, he approved. This is good. Factual, measured, compelling, send it. I emailed it to every homeowner in Shoreline Estates at 8 in the morning on a Thursday. By noon, my phone was ringing off the hook. By evening, a group of 30 neighbors had gathered in Ed Patterson's backyard for an impromptu meeting. The energy was electric. People were angry, betrayed, ready for change. Margaret Chen stood up and said, "I've lived here for 15 years. I've put up with Karren's nonsense because I thought it was just part of HOA life. But this is criminal. She stole from Blake. Who's to say she's not stealing from all of us through inflated vendor contracts or made-up fees?" That sparked a whole new conversation. People started comparing notes on HOA expenses, questioning whether the pool really needed $15,000 in repairs last year, wondering why landscaping costs had tripled under Karren's management. What had started as anger over my situation was morphing into a full audit of Karren's entire tenure. David Horowitz, who was an accountant, volunteered to review the HOA financial records. If there are irregularities, I'll find them. And if she's been embezzling beyond the boathouse rentals, we need to know. We drafted a recall petition that night. It was simple and direct. Karren Whitmore had violated her fiduciary duty to the community, had engaged in criminal conduct, and no longer had the confidence of the homeowners. We called for an immediate special election to remove her and elect a new board. Getting signatures was easier than I'd expected. Within 3 days, we had 40% of homeowners signed on, more than enough to force the election. I filed the petition with the HOA according to the bylaws, sending copies to Karren, the other board members, and the community management company that handled administrative tasks. Karren's response was to schedule an emergency board meeting to address false allegations and community discord. The meeting was set for the following Tuesday at 7 in the evening at the community clubhouse. Marcus advised me to record everything. "She's going to try to discredit you publicly. Don't let her. Stay calm, stick to facts, and let her hang herself." The clubhouse was packed. Easily 100 people showed up, way more than the room was designed to hold. Karren sat at the front table with Sharon Davies and Linda Morton flanking her, looking like a general preparing for battle. Her attorney Roger Bentley was there too, which told me she was taking this seriously. Karren called the meeting to order and immediately went on the attack. We're here tonight because a small group of troublemakers have been spreading vicious lies about me and the board. These lies have damaged our community's reputation and created unnecessary division. I want to address them directly. She proceeded to give a 20-minute presentation filled with half-truths and outright fabrications. She claimed the boathouse rentals were authorized by emergency board powers due to budget shortfalls. She said I'd given verbal permission initially and then reneged out of spite. She accused me of harassing her, threatening her, and coordinating a smear campaign. When she finished, I stood up. Karren, you're under criminal investigation for theft and fraud. There's a court injunction against you. You collected $30,000 in rental income from my property without permission and kept it all. These aren't lies, they're documented facts. The room erupted. People shouting questions, demanding answers. Karren tried to maintain control, but it was chaos. Finally, Ed Patterson stood up and his booming voice cut through the noise. I've lived in Shoreline Estates for 20 years. I've watched Karren's leadership become more authoritarian every year. What Blake is describing isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern, and now we have proof. I fully support the recall petition, and I encourage everyone here to sign it if you haven't already. One by one, other people stood up and shared their stories. The Horowitz's gray house, Margaret's son at the pool, Frank's solar panels. A woman named Susan talked about being fined for leaving her trash cans visible from the street for more than 2 hours. Another man described being threatened with legal action over a treehouse he'd built for his kids. Karren's face went from red to purple. She kept trying to interrupt, to defend herself, but the tide had turned. Even Sharon and Linda looked uncomfortable, clearly realizing they'd been complicit in something much bigger than they'd understood. The meeting ended without any formal votes or resolutions. Karren simply stormed out, her attorney following closely behind. But the damage was done. The community had turned against her. 3 days later, Detective Morrison called with the news I'd been waiting for. The prosecutor has filed charges against Karren Whitmore. Felony theft, fraud, and willful failure to pay taxes. She'll be arraigned next week. I wanted to give you a heads up in case the media picks up on it. The media did pick up on it. The Port Huron Times-Herald ran a story with the headline, "Local HOA President Charged in Rental Scheme." It detailed the charges, the amount of money involved, and included quotes from Tom Richardson and other families who'd been defrauded. Suddenly, my little neighborhood dispute was regional news. Karren hired a criminal defense attorney, some hotshot from Detroit named Martin Caldwell, who immediately started talking about misunderstandings and accounting errors. He gave an interview claiming Karren had intended to put all the rental income into HOA accounts, but had been overwhelmed with responsibilities and had simply lost track. Lost track of $30,000? Marcus laughed when he read the quote. That's the best they can do? A judge is going to see right through that. The special election for Karren's recall was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, the civil case was moving forward. Karren's countersuit had been dismissed under Michigan's anti-SLAPP law, and the judge had ordered her to pay my attorney fees for defending against it. My own lawsuit for the stolen rental income was scheduled for trial in 2 months. Karren tried one last desperate move. She offered a settlement. Through Roger Bentley, she proposed to return all the rental income, resign from the HOA board, and issue a public apology in exchange for me dropping the civil suit and asking the prosecutor to drop criminal charges. Marcus and I discussed it over coffee at a diner in downtown Lexington. It's not a bad offer financially, he said. You'd get your money back. She'd be gone from the HOA, and you could move on with your life. The criminal case would proceed regardless. You can't control that, but at least you'd be compensated. What does your gut tell you? My gut says she's trying to avoid criminal liability by painting herself as making amends. If you settle, her lawyer will use that to argue she's taking responsibility and doesn't deserve jail time. The prosecutor might go easier on her. So by settling, I'd potentially be helping her avoid the consequences she deserves. Possibly. I thought about it for a long time. About the stress of the past months, the damage to my peace of mind, the violation of my property and privacy. About all the other homeowners Karren had bullied over the years. About the principle of the thing. No settlement, she goes to trial, both criminal and civil. Marcus nodded approvingly. I was hoping you'd say that. The recall election took place on a Wednesday evening in August. The voting was held at the clubhouse over a 4-hour window, with paper ballots counted by an independent third party to ensure transparency. I showed up to vote but didn't campaign. The facts spoke for themselves. By 9 o'clock that night, the results were in. Karren Whitmore had been recalled by a vote of 78% to 22%. A new interim board was elected, including Ed Patterson as president, Margaret Chen as treasurer, and David Horowitz as secretary. Their first official act was to hire a forensic accountant to review all of Karren's financial management over the past 4 years. What they found was stunning. Karren had been embezzling in multiple ways. She'd hired her brother's landscaping company at inflated rates and received kickbacks. She'd approved unnecessary repairs from contractors who gave her cash rebates. She'd created fake vendor invoices and pocketed the money. The boathouse rentals were just the most blatant example of a systemic pattern of theft. The forensic accountant estimated Karren had stolen more than $100,000 from the HOA over 4 years. The new board immediately filed a police report, and Detective Morrison added embezzlement charges to the criminal case. Karren's criminal trial was held in October. I attended every day, sitting in the back of the courtroom and watching the prosecutions systematically dismantle her defense. They called witnesses who'd rented the boathouse. They presented financial records showing the money trail directly to Karren's personal accounts. They demonstrated that she'd hidden the income from the HOA, from the IRS, from everyone. Karren's attorney tried to argue that she'd been confused about her authority, that she'd genuinely believed the boathouse fell under HOA control. But the prosecutor destroyed that argument by showing Karren's own emails where she discussed keeping the rentals quiet and making sure I didn't find out. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing was scheduled for a month later. In the meantime, my civil trial proceeded. This one was faster, just 2 days. The judge ruled in my favor on every count, awarding me the full $30,000 in rental income, plus punitive damages of an additional $30,000 for Karren's willful and malicious conduct, plus all attorney fees and costs. Karren's house went up for sale a week later. She was financially ruined, facing jail time, and completely ostracized from the community she'd once ruled. The criminal sentencing hearing was on a cold November morning. Karren stood before Judge Holbrook, who'd granted the original injunction months earlier, and listened as the judge recited the evidence of her crimes. Mrs. Whitmore, you were entrusted with a position of leadership in your community. Instead of serving your neighbors, you exploited them. You stole from Mr. Quincy. You embezzled from the HOA. You defrauded families seeking vacation rentals. You evaded taxes. And when confronted with your misconduct, you retaliated, harassed, and attempted to destroy the reputation of the very person you'd victimized. These are serious crimes that demonstrate a profound lack of character and integrity. Judge Holbrook sentenced Karren to 3 years in state prison, with credit for time served and possibility of parole after 18 months. She also ordered full restitution to me, to the HOA, and to the families who'd been defrauded. The restitution totaled more than $150,000, money Karren didn't have. As the bailiff led Karren away in handcuffs, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was finally over. The nightmare that had consumed 6 months of my life had reached its conclusion. Justice had been served. I left the courthouse and drove back to Shoreline Estates, to my house on Lake Huron, to my boathouse that was finally truly mine again. I'd spent the past weeks cleaning it out, removing all traces of Karren's rental scheme, reclaiming the space as my sanctuary. Ed Patterson stopped by that evening with a bottle of bourbon. We sat on the dock watching the sun set over the water and toasted to new beginnings. The new board is working out well, he told me. We've already passed new bylaws limiting board authority, requiring financial transparency, and establishing term limits. No one person will ever have the kind of power Karren had again. That's good. That's really good. You know, Blake, what you did wasn't just about your boathouse. You freed the whole community. People are actually happy to live here again. They're not afraid of violation notices or arbitrary rules. We had a neighborhood barbecue last week, and the turnout was triple what it used to be. People are connecting, talking, becoming actual neighbors, instead of just people who live near each other. I sipped my bourbon and watched a heron glide across the water. I just wanted my property back. I didn't set out to be some kind of neighborhood hero. Maybe not, but that's what happened anyway. You stood up when it mattered. You didn't back down when she tried to intimidate you. And you saw it through to the end. That takes courage. The civil judgment money came through in January after Karren's assets were liquidated. The house sale, her retirement accounts, everything went toward restitution. I received my $60,000 plus legal fees, which came to about $90,000 total. The HOA recovered most of their embezzled funds. The defrauded families got their money back. I used some of my settlement to make improvements to the boathouse. New solar panels for power, a better heating system for year-round use, fresh paint and updated furniture. I wanted it to feel new again, untainted by Karren's corruption. On a Saturday in February, I invited everyone who'd supported me through the ordeal for a boathouse warming party. Ed and Beth Patterson, Margaret Chen, the Horowitz family, Frank Delgado, and about 20 others crowded into the space, eating pizza and celebrating the community we'd rebuilt. Speech, someone called out. Blake needs to give a speech. I reluctantly stood up, suddenly conscious of all the eyes on me. I'm not good at speeches, but I want to say thank you to all of you for believing me when Karren tried to make me look like the bad guy, for standing up with me when it would have been easier to stay quiet, for helping transform this neighborhood into something better. What Karren did was wrong, but in a weird way, she brought us together. She showed us what we don't want to be, and in fighting against that, we discovered what we do want to be: a real community, people who look out for each other, who hold leaders accountable, who don't tolerate abuse of power. So thank you. And here's to Shoreline Estates 2.0. Everyone raised their glasses and cheered. We spent the rest of the evening swapping stories, laughing about Karren's downfall, and making plans for future neighborhood events. As people filtered out into the cold night, I stood on the deck and looked at my home, my lake, my boathouse. It had been worth it. Every stressful moment, every legal battle, every sleepless night, I'd stood up for what was right and I'd won. Not just in court, but in reclaiming my peace, my property, and my community. Karren would be released from prison eventually, probably in a year or so with good behavior. She'd filed for bankruptcy, her reputation was destroyed, and she'd never hold a position of authority again. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I didn't feel guilty about it either. She'd made her choices, she'd faced the consequences. As for me, I got back to my normal life. My consulting business picked up again. I spent weekends on the lake with my Chris Craft, finally able to enjoy the boat without worrying about who might be occupying my boathouse. I became more involved in the HOA, serving on a committee to review and update all the community bylaws. The new board under Ed's leadership was transparent, reasonable, and actually responsive to homeowner concerns. Property values went up. Not because of authoritarian enforcement of arbitrary rules, but because people genuinely wanted to live in a community that functioned well. I ran into Tom Richardson, the Ohio father who'd testified at the injunction hearing, at a hardware store in Port Huron one spring afternoon. He recognized me and came over to shake my hand. "Mr. Quincy, I've been following the case. I saw Karren got sentenced." "Good. My family got our restitution check last month. We're planning to come back to the area this summer for vacation, but we'll actually rent a legitimate place this time. I'm glad everything worked out for you. Sorry your original vacation got ruined." "Are you kidding? My kids still talk about it. They think it's the coolest story. Their dad helped take down a criminal. I appreciate you sticking with it and making sure everyone got justice." After he left, I thought about the ripple effects of standing up to corruption. It wasn't just about me getting my money back or Karren going to prison. It was about all the people who'd been affected, directly or indirectly. The families who'd been defrauded, the neighbors who'd been bullied, the future homeowners who would benefit from better governance. The broader message that abuse of power has consequences. On a warm evening in June, almost exactly a year after I'd first discovered strangers on my dock, I hosted a small gathering in the Boathouse. Just a few close friends, including Marcus Chen, who'd become a genuine friend through the ordeal, Ed and Beth Patterson, and a woman named Rachel Lewis I'd started dating. She was a teacher in Port Huron, funny and kind and completely unimpressed by the whole Karren drama. "So this is the famous Boathouse," she said, looking around the loft. "Scene of the crime, or victim of the crime. However you want to put it. This is it, fully reclaimed and Karren-free. I still can't believe someone thought they could just rent out your property. The audacity." Marcus laughed. "Audacity is Karren's defining characteristic." "Well, was. I imagine she's a bit more humble these days in state prison." "Do you ever wonder what she's thinking?" Rachel asked. "Like, does she understand what she did wrong? Or does she still think she was justified?" I considered that. I don't know. Part of me thinks she genuinely believed she was entitled to do whatever she wanted because she had a title and some perceived authority. People like Karren don't see their actions as wrong. They see them as necessary exercises of power. But maybe prison has given her some perspective. Or maybe not. Either way, it's not my problem anymore. We ate grilled steaks and drank wine and watched the sun set over Lake Huron. The conversation drifted to other topics. Rachel's summer school program, Ed's plans to finally retire, Marcus's new case involving a property dispute in Ann Arbor. Normal, peaceful life. Later that night, after everyone had gone home and Rachel had given me a kiss goodnight before driving back to Port Huron, I sat alone in the boathouse and reflected on the journey. I'd bought property in Shoreline Estates because I wanted tranquility, a place to escape the chaos of the world. Instead, I'd been thrust into the middle of a drama that had tested my resolve in ways I'd never anticipated. But I'd come through it stronger, more confident, more connected to my community, and with a deeper appreciation for the importance of standing up for what's right. Even when it's difficult, Karren Whitmore had tried to steal my sanctuary. Instead, she'd inadvertently given me something more valuable: the knowledge that I could face injustice and win, that corruption could be exposed and punished, that communities could heal and grow stronger after betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. Thanks for a wonderful evening. Your boathouse is beautiful. So is the man who owns it. I smiled and typed back. Dinner at my place next week? I promise no HOA drama. It's a date. I turned off the lights and locked up the boathouse, walking back to the main house under a sky full of stars. Tomorrow I'd take the Chris Craft out for a cruise. Maybe call my brother in Chicago and tell him about the latest developments. Work on a design proposal for a client in Traverse City. Normal stuff. Good stuff. The nightmare was over. The sanctuary was restored. Life in Shoreline Estates was finally what it should have been all along. Peaceful, pleasant, and free from the tyranny of HOA Karren. And that, more than any court judgment or criminal sentence, felt like the real victory.